Hello and welcome to In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College. I haven't got my teeth in properly today. Yet again, Ben and I are both in lockdown, so we're doing this from separate venues. So please excuse us if there is some time lag between us talking. So today, Ben, we were going to talk about imposter syndrome. When we were talking about this before, you talked about a point that was quite interesting about the use of the word syndrome.
Yeah, I was saying I think syndrome is almost a medical term that suggests some sort of condition that maybe you can catch. You have the syndromes of an illness. And it's sometimes been said that when we talk about this term imposter syndrome, that I guess we need to define in a second, maybe syndrome isn't quite the right term, but I'm not really sure what would be the right term. Maybe complex, but then complex suggests that you're suffering from something that's particular to yourself and you can get over it. And I don't think that's appropriate either. I don't know, maybe thinking about how an individual functions in relation to their colleagues and their surroundings, maybe scenario, to feel that you're victim to an imposter scenario. But at the same time, for me, imposter is also a bit of a difficult word because it suggests subterfuge, defeat, that you're not who you say you are. And I think that when people talk about imposter syndrome, it's often that you are who you say you are, and one should be unapologetic for that, and that you do fit within certain understandings of how you function and your expertise and your role. I'm not just talking about universities here, but I'm talking more generally across, many private and public industries. So to my mind, it's a very difficult term, but I think, as we were saying earlier, it's very important to talk about this because it's something that I think is a fairly new idea within university sectors, and it's come in on the back of a good decade's worth of thinking about and activism around balancing between dominant groups and minority groups, and the damage that the sector's had because those balances haven't been historically struck.
It's very true. So that said, it's something that is experienced by quite a few people in higher education, and something that a lot of our postgraduate researchers talk about. It's been the topic of discussion in many a hangout and many a Twitter conversation. So we just wanted to kind of just talk about it really and just kind of break it down a little bit. I think it's important to say that actually this isn't going to go away. It's something that it doesn't end at the end of your doctorate. It's something that a lot of people feel, some people throughout the whole of their careers. There are people who are quite senior in organisations who struggle with this concept. So it's something that if you can tackle it early and recognise it, it's going to be better for you. So,
yeah. I think in a way it almost begins at the point of the completion, say, of a doctorate, because then you're doctor, and you think, well, am I really doctor? The as it were, the acceptance that you've been given this qualification and that you can therefore function in a different way is often the acceptance that I think raises a series of maybe self-doubts. So maybe in a way, the further you go, the greater this complex syndrome scenario can be.
Very true. One of the things that somebody said to me about feeling like an imposter is it often arises because we're comparing ourselves to others, and we talked about comparing ourselves to others and how unproductive that is in a vlog last week. But when we actually compare ourselves to others, what we're doing is we're comparing our insides, our feelings of insecurity, our doubts, our self-questioning, to other people's external projections. So we're comparing them to the mask that they're wearing. We're not comparing ourselves to their vulnerabilities. We're comparing ourselves to how they're projecting themselves in the world. So that's a really, really unfair comparison, because they could well be feeling equally as nervous at giving conference presentations as we do. They could also have that nagging doubt, that I think they call it the chimp, isn't it? That little voice in the head that has a negative rhetoric and has a negative conversation with us while we're trying to push ourselves and extend ourselves beyond our comfort zones. So one of the things that I would say is that it's really important to recognise that when we do compare ourselves to other people and we start to feel that that they're better than us, that what we're doing is remembering what we're doing is comparing our insides to their outsides. I think that's really important when it comes to when we look at other people and how other people function.
And indeed, in the university sector, there are many opportunities to compare yourself to other people and to find yourself wanting. In terms of priorities and achievements, they differ across different disciplines. And what may be terribly important in one discipline may not be in another. What may be quite achievable or easy in one discipline may not be in another. So you have a kind of low level of comparison opportunities, but you also have, natural formalized comparison as well, because I think you're in a way trying to hit various goals, various targets you've been given that you might also give yourself. So in a way, one is constantly reflecting on oneself and one's abilities and one's achievements and things like that. So I can see it's fairly widespread in the sector.
Given that reflection and being reflexive as a researcher is really, really important, I think then it's equally as important to kind of recognise imposter syndrome or those feelings of being an imposter when they arise, to be able to recognise it. So it's perhaps taking that reflexiveness one step further and asking the questions of those feelings about where they're coming from. What are the seeds that have been planted for those thoughts to arise, and then to start challenging those thoughts and pushing back. I mean, I often tell people about I'm going to say imposter syndrome. I've given my imposter syndrome a personality, and I can imagine what it looks like, because you've got those little, it's got a particular voice, it's got a particular stance, it appears at particular times, and so I've started to imagine what it looks like, what it sounds like, and that then allows me to fight back. And I found it really, really difficult to fight back to begin with. So I employed somebody to fight it for me. So when this character looms, I deploy Hong Kong Fooey, who fights off the imposter syndrome and pushes them back for me. And I know that's slightly complex, and but then I've got a bit of a wild imagination anyway. But I think it's important for you to get to know what those feelings are, what they sound like, what the voices in your head, what the messages are that they're telling you, so that you can start pushing back at them, or use a tool or an approach to push back at them, so that they don't stop you from doing things. I spent many years not doing things because of what the voice in my head, the feeling of it being an imposter in higher education meant for me, and what I thought it meant, and it took for somebody. I went to a workshop there's some workshops called the Aurora program, which is for to encourage women to become higher education leaders. And as part of that, we looked at this whole concept of feeling the imposter. And we spent the whole morning looking at it as part of this program. And it was through that I started to identify. Sorry, my computer just went. Starting to, you know, when that voice in my head said, that's not for you, to say, to question that and to push back and to actually do it anyway. And I was surprised at the results. And I think I tell quite a lot of people this story, that as a result of that, I doubled my salary within a year, and then was promoted to associate professor, which then increased my salary again. If I hadn't challenged it, I'd probably still be sitting on a salary grade that was lower than the postgraduate researchers that I taught would go into in their first job. So I think it's really, really important that that we find the strength, or if we can't find the strength, find the strategy that allows us to fight and push back.
I do like the idea of visualizing it, because that's kind of taking it out of your psyche and thinking about it somewhat more objectively. And then from that position, exactly as you say, Deborah, being able to understand the damage it can do and then understand ways in which to overcome that damage.
Yeah. So, one tip from you, Ben?
I think the tip from me is really first steps to recognize it as something that might be there. And I think once you've done that, you're well on the road to doing something about it. And
then a tip from me is don't let it take over your life. Don't let it take away your opportunities and your chances. Okay, so thank you for listening to us, and as always, we release vlogs every Friday, and we will. Sorry, somebody's tapping on my window. We release vlogs every Friday, so watch out for those. And if you subscribe to our channel, you'll hear when those vlogs are released. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to speaking to you again. Bye.
Bye.
Hang on.